So, in terms of what we're actually doing today, so what we're going to learn. So, the first thing is what are GLP-1s? We're going to then switch into how they actually work as a medication, why they work as well. The big part that we're going to be looking at is what does the research say about them, not just in terms of their efficacy, but more importantly, for a lot of people's concerns, is what happens when they stop. What does the research show actually happens to participants who have been tested over a long period of time of using medication and then coming off the medication as well? What that will do is allow me to segue and transition into why habits actually matter when it comes to the use of GLP-1s and how habits can be the key to long-term success. I'm also going to go through two little mini CBT exercises at the end that will be a loose guide on emotional regulation, and then we will look finally at next steps just after our Q&A. So, a little bit about me. So I'm Jonjo, JJ. I'm the founder and the head coach of Revive Nutrition. So, at the age of 21, I was around 154 kilo. Now, for my height, I'm only around 5'9". That is extremely heavy. I was classed on the BMI scale as morbidly obese. I was just short of the morbidly obese too. And the truth is, now that I am more mature, now that I've spent time getting to understand myself, now that I've spent time in CBT myself, in DBT myself as well, I've gotten to the point where I've realized that I got to that weight not just because I ate too much and didn't move enough, but because I was using food as an emotional coping mechanism. It's one of the things that I look back now, and the truth is that it felt normal at the time. Your environment is a critical reason as to why things feel normal. If everything you're seeing is food related, whether that's celebration means food, whether that's condolences means food, whether that's calming your anger down with food, it felt normal. And it's only when I look back now that I realized that it wasn't normal and I was very much misusing food. There is a lot of conversation around the idea that emotional eating and binge eating can be very heavily associated to the likes of alcoholism, to the likes of drug misuse. And the truth is that the pathways within the brain, which we'll speak about later, are very, very similar to that of an addict who uses drugs or an addict who uses alcohol or gambling, for example. So throughout my 20s, I lost over 75 kilograms. Now, that was maybe an 8 year period. Obviously, I'm 35 now, so all of the weight loss that I lost was all naturally. It was without the use of any sort of medication, etc. It got me to the point where when I was 29, I decided that I wanted something different from life and I wanted to pursue the things that helped me, which was therapy, which was diet, nutrition, exercise. So I retrained as a nutritionist and I moved from my corporate 9 to 5. I actually then also moved into a mental health training company based in Belfast, and I founded Revive Nutrition. And that's how I have got to the point where I'm tying together the psychological with the mental and the emotional, and the physiological of your exercise, your nutrition, your training, your movement, and things like that. So, let's get into it. So, what are GLP-1s? So, very simply, GLP-1 is actually a naturally occurring hormone that we all have. You have it, I have it, your neighbor has it, your parents, your friends have it. But as with all hormones, you may have a little bit more GLP-1 naturally occurring than I do. Your friend may have a little bit less than your other friend. Your partner may have a lot more than your neighbor. It is one of those things that, unfortunately, in life, some of us have super high testosterone, some of us have super high estrogen, some of us have super high GLP-1s. I myself most likely have quite low GLP-1. And one of the key indicators that happens with that is actually to do with obesity. It is a slightly sad paradox that it has been shown that the higher someone's fat cells are, the higher the amount of adipose tissue that someone has, the more likely they are to have less GLP-1 and also less leptin, which is another hormone, and leptin is your satiety hormone. And GLP-1 and leptin are very, very heavily linked together. Okay, so what are GLP-1 medications then? So GLP-1 medications are what's called exogenous drugs. So it's basically mimicking what's already in your body that you don't quite have enough of, and you're adding extra in from the outside. And that is in the form of a subcutaneous needle or injection. Okay. I'm not going to go into the injections, etc., and things like that because I have no skin in the game. I do not have commission codes. I do not have recommendations for which medication to use. There are four, five, six, seven different options that you have. I'm just going to go on a coverall base level as to what GLP-1 medications are. And as I said, they are an exogenous hormone that mimic the GLP-1 that is already sitting inside your body. Okay. And the outcome of those, which we'll discuss in a second, is that they make you feel fuller, they make you eat less, and ultimately they help you create a calorie deficit. And that, at the bottom line of absolutely everything, is why people lose weight. There is a calorie deficit that is obtained, and it is obtained through the use of medication because you feel fuller, you eat less, and that is the bottom line. The key thing to take away here, which you will see throughout these slides, the key theme that I will keep on saying is that they're not a magic fix, but they are a very, very effective tool. So, moving on to how to GLP-1s actually work. So, they work physically and they work on your gut and they work on your brain as well. And we're going to look at that brain gut axis. And essentially, what they do is that they affect your appetite, they affect your fullness of food actually already being inside you, and they manage and control your blood sugar levels. So, the first thing that we need to look at is stomach emptying. A fancy way of saying this is also called gastric emptying, okay? And essentially what this is put appetite to one side at the moment. We will talk about appetite in a moment, but this is for food that's already inside your body. So imagine the scenario is that you are currently using GLP-1 medication. One of the first things that you're going to notice is that you feel full a lot. And not only do you feel full a lot for long periods of time, but also small amount of foods make you feel full also. Okay. And the reason behind that is because of slow stomach emptying. And it's very simple. If you imagine that your stomach is literally like a holding cell, you obviously take food in through the mouth, down through the esophagus, goes down your digestional tract, and your stomach is a holding cell. It starts to get digested there. It needs to go down into your small and large intestines, and then it gets dissipated out as energy throughout the body. That stomach emptying slows down when you have high GLP-1 levels in your body. Okay, so the medication that you're taking, that basically stops or slows down quite heavily your stomach from releasing that food and breaking it down, which then makes you physically feel fuller for longer. Now, that may sound like a good thing to some people, but there are some side effects to that. Mainly, it's digestional discomfort, and that can present itself in a couple of different ways. Some of the main ones that you will be likely to feel are bloating, sometimes the likes of acid reflux and heartburn. Quite a lot of time, you will find people reporting nausea, and then ultimately, because of all those things, irritability. And I don't mean physical irritability, I mean emotional irritability, where you're just a little bit annoyed, you're a little bit, no one likes feeling nauseous, no one likes feeling bloated, no one likes that kind of heartburn feeling as well. So slow stomach emptying or gastric emptying, slowing down, is one of the main ways that GLP-1s work to help you create a calorie deficit because you physically feel fuller for longer. Now, the second way and the maybe more impactful way that GLP-1s work also is to do with food coming into the body. So we're putting the fact that when you do eat food, it slows down its digestion. We're putting that to one side. We're now looking at actually taking food on. And this can be a bit of a minefield because the truth is we do need calories to survive, and I will talk about that in a moment. But When your appetite is affected by GLP-1s, which it is, then you tend to forget to eat food because the signals just aren't there. And there's a word that I will continue to use throughout the rest of the webinar today, and it will be the mute button, as in it just hits mute. Okay. The truth is that all of our hormones that we have in our body are signals. You if you are tired, if you're sleepy and you feel drowsy, that's melatonin. That's your body's naturally occurring sleep hormone that makes you feel drowsy. It's a signal to sleep. If you are driving on the motorway and someone cuts into your lane and forces you to slam on the brakes, you get heightened, you get adrenaline, you get cortisol. Those are signals to sharpen you. Okay. There are other hormones that do different things, but the key thing is that you are not now getting as many of, if any, of your hunger signals. So what then happens is that if you are not signaled to do something, your brain will not act upon it. And GLP-1s massively reduce hunger signals, and they do that in two ways. Now, the first one is the brain effect, is what it's referred to. So it's appetite suppression. Okay, so your GLP-1s act on a part of your brain called your hypothalamus. This now hypothalamus is responsible for many different things within the body. So I'm not going to focus on those. I'm just going to focus on the fact that it is also the hunger center for the body. Okay, I mentioned another hormone earlier on called leptin, which is your satiety hormone. But the key one for your hunger that you get, like when you get grumbly belly and you're like, geez, I am absolutely starving. The key one for that is a hormone called ghrelin. And the easiest way to remember ghrelin for me when I'm speaking about it is that I remember the letter G. So ghrelin, and I link that to gremlin. You have that little gremlin in your stomach that's telling you you're hungry. Okay. GLP-1s will massively impact the production of ghrelin. It's your main hunger hormone. It is the main signal that will make you go and eat food. Okay. So because GLP-1s acts on the hypothalamus, you will have less ghrelin and you will have less hunger signals. That will mean that your appetite just isn't there. And people say they've maybe lost the meaning of the word appetite, really. They've said, oh, I have a big appetite, or I have no appetite at all. And really what it actually means is that you're just not hearing a signal. So if your appetite's quite low at the minute, it's because you're not hearing that, or you're not feeling that ghrelin signal. If you have a big appetite, chances are you probably just produce more ghrelin than most people. But when we use GLP-1s, that is almost muted. The mute button is hit. Now, as I've already touched on, we have gastric emptying slowing as well. But the big one, the third one for me as well, is that GLP-1s have been shown to interact with your dopamine as well. And quite a lot of time, if you're anything like me, and this is me using my personal experience, you will have used dopamine as used food as a source of dopamine. Dopamine is our reward hormone. It is like our brains absolutely adore it. It's like our brains light up like lightning, like fireworks when we have dopamine. And a lot of the times people who misuse food associate food with dopamine. And one of the big things that GLP-1s can do with that is to slow down that reward driven eating. So you all of a sudden don't quite obsess about food. You don't associate food with happiness anymore. Okay. So that is on the brain, on the hormonal side of things, of how GLP-1s work. The other way that they work as well is that they actually act upon your pancreas. Okay. So this is more to do with the insulin side of things. And GLP-1s obviously are their origins really are for diabetic patients because of their interaction with blood sugar control. Okay, so basically what happens is that without GLP-1s, our blood sugar levels can spike and fall. And if we feel a lull in blood sugar levels, that can instantly make us want to eat food. If we feel a lull in energy, we want to eat food. Now, what GLP-1s will do is they will stabilize that. So they will have a stabilizing effect on your blood sugar levels, which also then means that you will have fewer crashes. You will also have fewer spikes as well, which is a positive thing. But therefore, The nice stable run across the middle rather than up and down makes you far less likely to be reaching for food as well. So those are the three main ways that GLP-1s actually interact with your body. They have gastric emptying slows down, which makes you feel fuller for longer. When you don't already have food in your stomach, your appetite is reduced because of the interaction with your ghrelin and your hypothalamus. It also interacts with the dopamine receptors as well. And then finally, it stabilizes your blood sugar levels. Now, all of those things can be seen as a very positive thing, and which they definitely are. This is why it's an effective tool. But as with anything in life, the poison is in the dose. And if we become over reliant on them, or if that becomes the only way that we are effectively managing our weight, then that can be problematic. And that's why I've created this webinar. So the bottom line is this, though, is that everything that has happened there is the effectiveness, it's the efficacy of it. But the bottom line is that a calorie deficit is why you're losing weight. GLP-1s do not burn fat for you. GLP-1s do not create muscle for you. GLP-1s do not do anything other than what we've just spoken about on a hormonal level. Okay, it's all to do with gastric emptying. It's all to do with interaction with your hypothalamus, and it's all to do with interaction with your pancreas. They do not by themselves burn fat for you. The thing that makes you lose weight is that you're in a calorie deficit as an effect of what has happened with the GLP-1 usage. So moving on to part two, what does the research say? And I'm going to start by looking at the positive sides of research as to how effective these medications are, because as I said before, they absolutely are. And then we're going to move on into the weight regain and possibly the negative sides of things. So overall, most people lose between 10 to 15% of their body weight when they're using GLP-1s. Now, results do vary, don't get me wrong, but across the large majority of the research that we have available to us now, you will see that most people lose between 10 to 15%. Now, that is slightly skewed in the sense of people now misusing these medications, people who quote unquote don't need it. And what I mean by that is maybe people from the fitness industry and things like that who objectively do not have a large amount of body fat to lose, and they're purely losing it for maybe aesthetics reasons. Those numbers have been skewed slightly, but on average, it is 10 15%. Now, breaking it down ever so slightly, the two main ones that you will see, Wegovy or Ozempic, in brackets I've put the actual name of the drug itself. So the main ones you have is semaglutide and the other one is triceptide. You will see that they have slightly different effects. So with semaglutide, average weight loss is about 15% across 68 weeks. I've also cited the paper that shows that. However, 1 in 3 people lost up to 20%. Now it's up to. So the truth is that that could be maybe as low as 5% of their body weight as well. Hence why it's such a broad spectrum. Now, the other main GLP-1 that is used nowadays is triceptide. And for that, the highest dose, which is 15 milligrams, across 72 weeks, people lost around 21% of their body weight. However, up to 50% of participants lost at least 20% of the body weight. Now, it's important to also speak about the fact of that there are differing doses as well. So specifically on the Mounjarno and the triceptide side of things, it was up at 15 milligrams. This is the highest dosage that you will ever be prescribed. Typically, what happens is that people will be referred to whether it be NHS or a private medical firm, and they will start you at lower dosages, and then they will progress you on up as the weeks progress. What you will find is that each time that you move into a new milligram or a new dosage, the initial side effects, the negative ones of the nausea and the bloating and things like that, they will come back again. Your body will get used to things. Your body will get used to that new level of GLP-1 in the body, and then you will move on again. That in itself means that these medications have a shelf life. You cannot go up above 50 milligrams. Certainly people can, but it is absolutely not medically advised to be doing so. Um, and the truth is that that's why I'm doing this seminar, because everyone and the granny can legally, illegally, whatever way you want to look at it, get their hands on these medications. It is self-administered, and therefore people could be tempted to work their way through the milligrams, get up to 15 and go, oh, this isn't working anymore. I'm just going to go up to 20. And that is just it. Like that's a race to the bottom. It's a never ending scale of people keeping on pushing up, and you will eventually do some real serious pancreatic damage to yourself. Okay. So the highest you'll ever be prescribed is 50 milligrams. Absolutely do not ever go above that. But that does mean that it has a shelf life, because you will get accustomed to the 15, and then where do you go from there? So moving on, as we're saying, where do you go from there? So medication typically will have to stop at some point. Most research shows that it was either between 65 weeks to 75 weeks of medication actually being delivered to participants. There's no real research post that amount of time. The typical time is around that sort of 60 to 75, if you want to broaden the spectrum a little bit. So what does the research actually say after medication ceases? Well, a 2022 study showed that after a year of the medication having stopped, participants had actually regained two-thirds of the weight that they had lost. So that's 66%. So considering maybe someone loses a stone of body weight in that time, then they will have regained two-thirds of that within a year. And to me, and this is where I'm going to put my opinion into it, to me, that's almost a waste of time and money. And my personal opinion is that it almost sets you back even further, because you then could potentially fall into the mindset that, oh, I need this medication to do this. I need this medication to lose body fat and to lose weight. And as I said at the very beginning, the medication is not a magic pill. It's not a magic fix. It is an effective tool, but it is not what you need to have long-term success. Long-term success in terms of fat loss and weight loss is a calorie deficit, and how you manage your emotions and your habits around that. It is a tool that needs to be used as and when, but the side effects are, as I've explained already, and also the downside is that it has been shown, and I will show in the next slide as well, that not only is a lot of the weight regained, but often it can actually be regained in quite a short amount of time. So in 2025, so just this year, meta-analysis of 8 different papers found that a significant amount of weight had been regained by participants within 8 weeks. And the truth is that that is typical of what I will see across people I have dealt with as well. Obviously, on an anecdotal basis, people who have come to me for coaching maybe 12, 13, 14 weeks after ceasing medication have basically said, yeah, look, I had great success with the medication in the beginning. Once I ceased, for whatever reason they ceased, then they regained a majority of their weight. Sometimes people actually ended up gaining more weight than what they had actually initially started at. So, part three, why does the weight gain actually happen, or why does the weight regain happen? And here's the key thing. I want to try and remove as much guilt as possible here. It is not about willpower, it is about your biology. And what do I mean about that? So there's four major ways that weight gain, regain happens. So the first one is that the GLP-1s have now left your body. You've ceased medication. The first thing that happens is that your appetite returns. Okay, so remember, as I said at the start, GLP-1s suppress your hunger. They suppress ghrelin. Once that is stopped, your normal hunger signals have kicked back in. So everything that you experienced before, your relationship with food, your relationship with your appetite, your relationship with eating that was there before, returns. Your hunger and your appetite returns to back to where it was. And not only that, but anecdotally, which I've experienced with my own clients, not only does your hunger signals return, but also you're kind of shocked by them, because you've just spent 3 months, 6 months, 9 months away from them. You forget what that feels like, and you're overcome with them. Okay. And the mute button is the thing that I will continue talking about throughout the talk today. The mute button was on. It was total silence. It was almost bliss because you didn't hear that food noise. You didn't hear those cravings. And the minute that they come back on, it can be deafening. The second thing that happens is that your ghrelin levels rise again. Okay, so ghrelin, as I said before, is your hunger hormone, and the ghrelin will explode. It will make you food obsessed. Once it comes back, you will think about food when you're hungry. You will think about food when you're bored. You will think about food when you're angry. Ghrelin will be at a higher level again. The third reason why weight gain regain happens is that your slower metabolism. Okay. So what I mean by that, and this is actually slightly a positive, but is also something that happens in patients, participants, clients who have achieved weight gain, weight loss naturally. Okay. So your body is a calorie burning machine. All of the functions in your body, whether it's respiratory, cardiovascular, general movement, everything, all of the functions in your body burn calories. You have something called a BMR. Your BMR is your basal metabolic rate, and it's basically the amount of calories that you burn at rest. Now, that is directly proportionate to the size of your body. Higher body size means higher BMR. Lower body size means lower BMR. Now, in context of medication ceasing, you have ceased medication because you've gotten down on the scale. Typically, you have maybe lost 3, 4, 5 stone, whatever it might be. That means your body now burns less calories than what it did 4 or 5 stone ago. Okay. Now, what then happens is that you have not readjusted to that. You have not understood that now your body needs less calories to stay that weight. So the combination of the first two things happens, appetite returns, ghrelin returns. Now, not only does those two things return to make you eat at the same level that you were eating at before, but now you actually need less calories. So you're actually going to gain more weight because the number of calories you were eating beforehand, before medication, was high, but it's now extra high in comparison to your new, slimmer, svelte physique that is burning less calories. Okay, so you now have a slower metabolism. The fourth thing that you have is the loss of the delayed gastric emptying. Okay, so your stomach goes back to emptying at the normal rate again. You will start eating and getting back to normal digestion, and then the body empties, and all of a sudden you're hungry again. And these are all interlinked. So number one, number two, number four are interlinked. Number three is kind of the positive side effect of having lost weight, but doesn't really occur to people because maybe they have not lost weight before, or maybe they haven't been given the right guidance or the right coaching by individuals. So, moving on then into part four, habits over medication. My genuine true belief is that habits are the key to long-term success. As I've said once, I've said it twice, maybe 3 times now, GLP-1s hit the mute button for you. But once the GLP-1 ceases, all that sound comes back. The big thing that I want you to take away is that I'm not demonizing GLP-1s. They are an extremely effective tool. But what you must see GLP-1s as is dual approach. One, they do help you lose body fat. They do help you lose weight. They do all of the things, all the physical things that we've talked about on the left-hand side. But whilst you're using them, you must be forming the habits. You must be forming the emotional regulation toolkit in order to keep those off whilst you're off the medication. Your habits and your emotional regulation are going to be what keeps the weight off. The GLP-1s are going to help you get the weight off. How you handle yourself emotionally and with regards to your food choices and your relationship with food after the medication, that is what's going to keep the weight off for long-term success. So, the emotional and the psychological side of things. I've talked about 5 different things here. A couple of them are intertwined. Definitely the first two of the emotional eating, binge eating, and stress and triggers are definitely intertwined, but there's three other reasons that I want to look at as well. So the truth is that once GLP-1 medications cease, the mute button's not there anymore. Okay, so what you'll find, and I've definitely found it anecdotally with clients that I work with who are using medication, is that they typically handle emotional and stressful triggers differently whilst they're on GLP-1 medication. The truth is, stress and triggers will always happen, regardless if you're using medication or not. But because of the fact that the GLP-1s quieten that food noise, they quieten those hunger triggers, okay? Even if you have deeply ingrained emotional eating tendencies, I have found anecdotally that my clients who are using medication, who have a history of emotional eating, when they're using GLP-1s, if they're stressed and triggered, they don't turn to food. And the reason why they don't turn to food is because their hunger signals just aren't there. Okay. So it's one of those things that I like to picture it as when someone is not using GLP-1s and they are stressed or triggered, the loudest noise that they hear in the stress or the trigger is go to food. Food will make you feel better. That same trigger that happens to someone who is using GLP-1s, the loudest noise that they will hear might be journal. They might be listen to music, listen to a podcast, exercise, talk to a friend, other coping mechanisms basically. Because that sound, that noise, that signal of hunger just isn't there. So it doesn't even present itself as an option to help you with this stress and trigger. However, when you cease medication and you are stressed or triggered, which we all will be at some point in life, weekly, daily potentially, often because that hunger signal is back, you may then fall back into emotional eating. You may fall back into binge eating. And the truth is that how you manage your stress and your triggers and things like that is going to be absolutely key to removing yourself from that emotional and binge eating cycle. The third thing that happens when GLP-1s cease is the reward-seeking brain reactivates. So I spoke earlier about the interaction between GLP-1s and dopamine. Quite a lot of the time, people who misuse food because of the dopamine reaction, that reward reaction. And they are maybe feeling stressed, tired, sad, whatever it might be, and they want to feel better. So they use food to get dopamine, and it's the dopamine that makes you feel better. It's the dopamine that makes you feel fuzzy. Make no bones about it. It is not the Chinese takeaway that makes you happy. It is not the ice cream that makes you happy. It is not the crisps that make us happy. It is the dopamine that derives from eating those things. And that reward seeking brain reactivates when your medication ceases. The next thing that will happen on the emotional and psychological things is that your mood will fluctuate again. And mood is very closely linked to blood sugar levels. And as I said in the beginning, one of the physiological ways that GLP-1 works is that it stabilizes your blood sugar levels. Once that medication ceases, you will find that you will potentially spike and crash again, and that will then lead to mood changes. When I say mood changes, I'm not so much saying anger and frustration and things like that, but I'm talking about the likes of brain fog. I'm talking about cognitive function, where your mood can be elevated when you've had food, and then it can die off, and you can feel lethargic and low and sluggish when you are not having food. And that in itself can lead you to want more food. The last one is a very interesting one, and I'm maybe going to use some of my opinions on this rather than just raw information and data. Weight loss expectations have not been reset. So, what I mean by that is from the people that I've worked with who have used GLP-1s with me, have then ceased it, is that their expectations have not been reset. They get annoyed and frustrated when their scale weight is not moving in the same way as it was when they were using GLP-1s. The truth is this: usage of GLP-1s is like throwing petrol on a fire. They are extremely effective. You will lose a lot of weight using them. Once you stop using them, you will not be losing that amount of weight. It just won't happen. But what can happen emotionally is that you've attached yourself to the joy and the dopamine of losing that amount of weight on a weekly or a daily basis. And once that ceases, that can become a very frustrating and emotional situation, which then can circle back up to stress and triggers, can circle back up to emotional and binge eating. And those are the 5 ways in which emotional eating and psychological eating can be a causation of weight regain after medication ceases. The key point and the key takeaway is that these were the original causes. It was stress. It was emotionality. It was triggering events. It was us turning to food as a coping mechanism. It was us turning to food as a dopamine source. They didn't go away. They just had the mute button hit on them. And the overwhelming feeling of all of that coming rushing back once you cease medication can be just too much for people to handle. And that's why weight regain happens. And quite often, some people will see that they will actually gain more weight than what they initially had. So, still in the world, in the realm of habits and emotionality. So learning how to emotionally regulate is going to be key. Your ability to tackle and handle emotions without the use of food is going to be your biggest guardian to keeping the weight off that you've lost whilst using medication. So I'm going to move on to our two mini CBT exercises. These are from my Revive one-to-one coaching. These are a small insight into what we do with one-to-one clientele. And I'm going to speak about identifying our emotions with our blast technique, and then I will move into a emotionality and coping mechanisms in the next slide as well. So the first one here is blast. So I want to set the scene for you. You are angry, you are triggered, you're in some sort of way emotionally heightened. Okay. You need to be able to ask yourself something very quickly to help identify what's going on. Because if you do not have sight of what's happening, you cannot address it. You cannot help yourself out of that situation. And the way in which we identify what's happening is the word blast. So you need to ask yourself, am I bored? Am I lonely? Am I angry? Am I stressed? Am I tired? And what this does, what this little acronym does, is it gives you the tools to try and understand what's actually happening right now. Because the truth is, you will need to marry up your coping mechanism to whatever you're feeling. There's no point in you choosing a coping mechanism that is journaling, which is a very solo thing, right? If you're feeling lonely, if your trigger is the L portion of blast, journaling might not necessarily help that because that's a very solo technique. Whereas speaking to a friend or going for a coffee or a walk with a friend will definitely help with the loneliness. Or if you are angry, then maybe some sort of physical activity to help you dissipate that energy, that would be the right coping mechanism for you. So the key thing is, and this is why we've put blast first before we look at our coping mechanisms, the key thing is that we need to make sure that we are identifying what is actually happening. So am I bored? Am I lonely? Am I angry? Am I stressed? Or am I tired? And then moving on from that, SSS. I nicknamed this my mental health first aid kit. So it's a first aid kit that sits in the back of our brain that, just like any other first aid kit, we hope to not use, but it's there in case of emergency. And these are our three coping mechanisms. And the key thing is, and the reason why I've labeled these as somewhere, someone, something, is because they will grow with you. There's no point in me telling you something specific right now because you are not who you're going to be in 6 months. You're not who you're going to be in 6 years, but you can always refer back to SSS at any time that you want to. And it's somewhere, someone, something. So once I've identified from Blast, once I've identified how I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it, then I need to say to myself, okay, what would be a sensible coping mechanism instead of using food? Okay, so for me, my first protocol would be somewhere. If I am feeling heightened emotions in a space, I'm currently in my office. If I am feeling triggered here, one of the best things I can do is physically remove myself from here. Okay, what that will do is remove whatever has triggered me from my eyesight, from my thoughts. So for me, somewhere is one of the most powerful ones that you can do. And it could be as simple as removing yourself from the room that you're in and going to another room. But for me personally, putting yourself into nature is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Going on a walk by yourself, going on a walk with friends, taking your dogs for a walk, physically removing yourself from the trigger point is absolutely critical. So that's one option for you in the first S is somewhere. The next one is someone. And this is a confidant. This is a non-judgmental space of someone that you can speak to without fear of being judged, somewhere that you feel safe. And for me, I have become many Revive clients someone. They speak to me if they are triggered about something. They speak to me about sometimes their innermost issues. And that is because Revive in itself is a non-judgmental, compassionate space where I have total client confidentiality. They will speak to me about things that are going on with their partners. They will speak to me about things that are going on at work. They will speak to me about their deepest, darkest stresses and worries. Because only when we get to know those things and we get to work through them, can we really address them. So your second S, once you've identified through Blast, your second S is someone. Who can I speak to? Who can I be with? And the last one is something. So this is a hobby or is a pastime or just something that you can do that takes your mind away. So for me personally, this sounds daft, but for me, I lift the acoustic guitar. I say to myself, oh, I'm going to learn a song. And what that does is that it takes my brain away from the growling, it takes my brain away from the stress, and it makes me focus on learning different chords and learning song progressions. So, just to go back, we must identify how we're feeling and why we're feeling it in order to allow us to choose the correct coping mechanism. And those three things are there instead of using food. So what we're going to do now is we are going to open up to a Q&A. As I said, if you have any private questions you would like to ask me one-to-one, you can email me. It's jj@revive-nutrition.co or